The grandfather paradox. You step through a shimmering portal. The air feels thick with the scent of burning coal, and the world around you is frozen in the haze of nostalgia. It's 1950, and the streets are bustling with vintage cars, women in elegant dresses, and men in neatly pressed suits, their shoes shining in the dull sunlight. You look down at your hands and realize you've traveled back in time to the moment that has always haunted your mind. The moment when your grandfather first met your grandmother. For years you've wondered, what would happen if you stopped them from meeting? What if you rewrote that one moment in history and changed the entire course of your existence, not out of malice but purely out of curiosity? An experiment to see if you could really rewrite destiny itself. You follow your grandfather, observing his daily routine. He walks to the corner diner every day, sits by the same window, and reads the newspaper. You've seen the scene countless times in your head, and now you're here. You see the young woman, who would later become your grandmother, walking into the diner and sitting at the same table where your grandfather always sits. Weeks pass. You learn their habits, their words, their movements. You prepare for that day, the fateful day when their paths will cross. But today is different. You make your move. You approach your grandfather, distract him, pull him away from the diner just for a few minutes. It's just long enough that he doesn't meet her. He turns around, confused, but oblivious to what's just happened. You watch as his life unfolds differently. He never meets her, never marries, never has children. The world begins to shift. You feel it in your bones. First, it's subtle. Your surroundings blur as memories begin to fade. You forget the sound of your own name, then your childhood home, your favorite song, the faces of your loved ones. The memories slip away like sand through your fingers. Then, just as suddenly, you're gone. There's no dramatic moment, no explosion of light. You simply vanish, erased from time, as if you were never there at all. This is the grandfather paradox. You've altered history, but in doing so, you've erased the very existence that allowed you to go back in time. If you're never born, then how could you have gone back to stop the meeting in the first place? You created a causal loop, a paradox with no clear beginning or end. It's a mind-bending contradiction. If you never existed, you could not have gone back to change the past, but if you didn't change it, you would still exist. The paradox forces us to confront the fragility of time and the absurdity of trying to control it. Is time a straight line, or is it more like a tangled knot, a loop that binds us all? 2. The bootstrap paradox. You've always been fascinated by the idea of time travel. One evening, while perusing your favorite antique shop, you come across something odd, a dusty, weathered manuscript. It's filled with strange symbols, diagrams, and what appears to be detailed instructions for building a time machine. Curiosity burns within you as you flip through the pages, realizing that these instructions are from the future. There's no way this manuscript could exist without some kind of explanation, but somehow it does. You decide to follow the instructions, to see if this time machine could be real. After weeks of hard work, you construct the machine, and with trembling hands, you set the controls to travel back in time. The machine hums to life, and in an instant, you find yourself in the past, right where you found the manuscript in the first place. But here's the twist. You bring the manuscript back with you and give it to your past self. They use the manuscript to build the machine. The manuscript is passed through time, but it never truly originates. It exists because of itself. No one wrote it, no one created it. It simply exists because you went back in time and gave it to yourself. This is a paradox, a loop of causality that has no true starting point. It's as if the manuscript has always existed, but it only came into existence because of your actions. Breaking it down, this is the bootstrap paradox. It suggests that an object or piece of information can exist without ever having been created. You receive the manuscript from your future self, but in doing so, you create the very future that would give you the manuscript. There is no original source. The manuscript's origin is tangled in time. It's a paradox that leaves us questioning the very fabric of reality. How can something exist without a creator? It makes us consider the nature of existence itself. Is it possible for things to exist without a cause? Or does everything have a beginning, even if we can't trace it? 3. The twin paradox. You've always wanted to understand the true nature of time, so you volunteer for a scientific experiment that promises to unlock the mysteries of relativity. The plan is simple. You'll board a spaceship and travel at nearly the speed of light, while your twin brother stays behind on Earth. You both will keep track of time, and after your journey, you will reunite and compare the results. The day arrives. You step aboard the sleek spacecraft, and the engine rumbles to life. As the ship accelerates, you feel the strange sensation of time slowing down. You glance at your watch, and sure enough, it ticks slower than it would on Earth. The further you travel, the more the fabric of time seems to stretch. You experience only a year of travel, but back on Earth, your brother ages much faster. You journey through distant stars and galaxies, but time feels different. Finally, after a year, you return to Earth. You step out of the spacecraft, eager to reunite with your twin. But when you see him, your heart sinks. He looks far older than you remember. Decades have passed for him, yet only 1 year has passed for you. The time dilation effect of your speed has caused your clocks to tick at different rates. You haven't aged, but he has. Breaking it down, this is the essence of the twin paradox, an anomaly predicted by Einstein's theory of relativity. Time is not absolute. It depends on your relative motion. For the twin traveling at near light speed, time slows down, while for the twin on Earth, time continues to move normally. This paradox forces us to reconsider how we perceive time, as something that isn't fixed but malleable and relative to our speed. Time, it seems, is not the universal constant we once thought it was. 4. The ship of Theseus. You stand on the deck of a grand ancient ship, staring out at the endless horizon. This is the ship of Theseus, a vessel that has sailed through storms and across vast oceans for centuries. Over time, the ship has undergone countless repairs. The wood has rotted, the sails have been replaced, and even the ropes have been swapped out for newer, stronger material. Slowly, piece by piece, the ship has been transformed. As you walk through the ship's corridors, you realize something unsettling. Every part of the ship has been replaced. There is no original wood left, no trace of the ship's former structure. Yet, it is still called the ship of Theseus. Then, an odd thought occurs to you. If you could somehow collect all the original parts that were removed over the years and reassemble them into a new ship, would that ship still be the ship of Theseus? You begin to question, is the identity of the ship based on its material parts or its continuity? The fact that it has sailed, uninterrupted, through the seas for centuries. Breaking it down, this is the ship of Theseus paradox. It challenges the notion of identity and asks us to consider what truly makes something itself. If you replace every part of an object, is it still the same object? This paradox extends beyond ships and challenges the nature of human identity as well. Over time, ourselves, our memories, and even our personalities change. Are we still the same person we were 10 years ago? The paradox raises questions about the nature of identity, continuity, and change. Is it the parts that matter, or is it the journey itself? 5. The Sorite's paradox, paradox of the heap. You're standing before a large heap of sand watching the grains pile up. It's massive, stretching in all directions like a miniature mountain. You begin removing grains one by one. With each grain that disappears, the heap seems to shrink, but it still looks like a heap. You remove another and another, yet the pile remains. Eventually, you remove so many grains that the heap becomes almost imperceptible. But at what point can you say that it's no longer a heap? Is it the moment you remove a single grain? Or is it only when the pile is completely gone? You stand there pondering the nature of change. It's a gradual process. Each removal of sand seems insignificant, yet when you look at the heap in its entirety, the change is profound. Breaking it down, this is the Sorite's paradox, also known as the paradox of the heap. It explores how we define categories and boundaries. At what point does a heap of sand stop being a heap? Is there a clear boundary? This paradox challenges us to think about how we define and categorize things in our world, especially when change happens in small, incremental steps. Where do we draw the line? When does something stop being one thing and become another? 6. The liar paradox. You're sitting in a small cafe, sipping on a warm cup of coffee. Across from you sits an acquaintance, someone you've met only a few times. They lean in and say, "Everything I tell you from now on is a lie." Your heart skips a beat. The words seem innocent enough, but now you're trapped in a strange dilemma. You wonder, if everything they say is a lie, then is this statement itself a lie? If their statement is false, then it must mean that they're telling the truth, which makes the statement true, which would mean it's a lie again. It's like trying to pin down a moving target. Every time you think you've caught it, it slips away. Your mind starts to spin as you consider the implications. Is it possible to speak a truth that contradicts itself? Can a statement both be true and false at the same time? This paradox challenges the limits of language and logic itself. It suggests that not all statements are straightforward and can lead to endless loops of self-refutation. You can't trust the speaker, but you also can't trust the idea that you can't trust them. It's the heart of the liar paradox, a puzzle that has confounded philosophers and logicians for centuries. The paradox shows how language and self-reference can create contradictions that seem to defy logic itself. Breaking it down, the liar paradox arises when a statement refers to itself, creating a loop where it can't consistently be either true or false. It raises deep questions about truth, self-reference, and the limits of logical systems. It's an idea that forces us to rethink how we define truth in a world full of contradictions. 7. The paradox of the unexpected hanging. Imagine you're in a courtroom. The judge stands before you and the other prisoners, delivering an unusual sentence. You will be hanged at noon on one weekday in the following week, but the execution will be unexpected. You will not know the day of your hanging until the executioner comes for you. At first, it seems like a strange punishment, but you think it through. How can this hanging be unexpected if you know it's coming sometime in the week? You reason that the hanging cannot happen on Friday, because if you make it through Thursday, you will know it's Friday, and therefore it can't happen unexpectedly. As the week progresses, you eliminate each day as a possibility. By Thursday, you're certain you will not be hanged at all. But then, on Wednesday, the executioner arrives. Your knees weaken as you realize the hanging has caught you completely off guard. It happened unexpectedly, just as the judge had said. Breaking it down. The paradox of the unexpected hanging plays with our expectations of knowledge and certainty. It shows how our assumptions about time, fate, and prediction can lead to contradictions. Even when we think we know what will happen, our expectations can trap us into being surprised. The paradox forces us to consider how prediction and certainty interact with time and events. It highlights the tension between knowing something in theory and having it unfold in a way that defies our expectations. 8. The paradox of the ravens. You're standing in a field, gazing up at a sky filled with clouds. You notice something. A black raven perched on a nearby fence post. You've learned something in school about how we form generalizations from observation. All ravens are black, you recall. But then you wonder, how many observations does it take to confirm that all ravens are black? As you ponder, you notice something strange. Another raven, just a few feet away, is also black. You smile, confirming your hypothesis. But then, something even stranger happens. Someone walks past you, holding a white sock. As they pass, they drop it on the ground, and you pick it up, thinking nothing of it. But here's the twist. Does the white sock also confirm the hypothesis that all ravens are black? Logically, it seems to make sense. Seeing a white sock is technically an observation that does not contradict the idea that all ravens are black. But intuitively, it feels off. How can a white sock have anything to do with ravens? Breaking it down. This is the raven paradox, which challenges how we confirm generalizations. It questions how observations, seemingly unrelated, can still affect our beliefs about the world. It forces us to confront the limitations of our reasoning. Just because something doesn't contradict a statement doesn't necessarily support it. This paradox raises deeper questions about confirmation bias and how we construct knowledge based on incomplete or unrelated observations. 9. The paradox of the arrow. You are watching an archery contest in a vast open field. The competitor stands at the ready, aiming his arrow at the target. As you watch, you realize something peculiar. The arrow, in any given moment, is always stationary. Each instant that passes, the arrow is at rest in one place, halfway between the archer and the target, or at the exact point in flight where its speed has been reduced to nothing. In that very moment, the arrow isn't moving, and yet the arrow continues on its path toward the target. It's a contradiction. How can something that's stationary be in motion? Breaking it down. This is the arrow paradox, proposed by Zeno of Elea. It challenges our understanding of motion and time. If time is divided into infinitely small moments, then in each moment, the arrow is at rest. But we know that the arrow does travel, and it reaches the target. This paradox forces us to reconsider the nature of movement, time, and the way we experience the world around us. It challenges the idea that time can be divided infinitely, and in doing so, questions how we understand change itself. 10. The paradox of the time traveler's letter. You find yourself holding an envelope, written in your own handwriting. The date on the letter is years in the future, a time when you've long forgotten about this moment. In the letter, you read something cryptic. You must travel back in time and deliver this letter to yourself at this exact moment. You will understand why when you read it. You're stunned. You've been given a mission by yourself, a directive from your future self. You try to ignore the possibility, but something compels you to act. You travel back to this moment, just like the letter instructed, and hand it to your past self. But here's the catch. As you hand the letter to yourself, you wonder, did you ever really choose to act on this letter? Or did it merely set events in motion so that you would follow its instructions? Breaking it down. This is a variation of the causal loop paradox. Often explored in time travel narratives, it suggests that events can unfold because they are destined to happen, creating a loop where the origin of an event is influenced by the very event itself. It challenges the notion of free will and causality. Can we truly make independent decisions, or are we bound by the consequences of our past and future choices? 11. The paradox of the barber. You walk into a small, peaceful village where a curious problem arises. The townspeople are talking about the barber, a well-respected man in the village who has a peculiar rule. The barber shaves all those and only those men in the village who do not shave themselves. The situation seems clear at first. The barber shaves all the men who don't shave themselves, and all the men who shave themselves are excluded from the barber's services. But then you begin to ask yourself, who shaves the barber? If the barber shaves himself, then according to the rule, he shouldn't be shaving himself, as only those who don't shave themselves can be shaved by him. But if he doesn't shave himself, then according to the rule, he must shave himself. Breaking it down. This is the barber paradox, a self-referential puzzle that forces us to confront the problem of paradoxes within sets. It's a variation of Russell's paradox, which challenges the limits of logical definitions. The barber's rule cannot consistently apply to him without creating a contradiction. It challenges the idea of self-reference and sets, highlighting how seemingly simple rules can unravel into deep contradictions when applied to their own boundaries. 12. The paradox of free will. You wake up one morning to find yourself standing at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. On the left is a path that leads through a forest, while on the right is a road that leads to the city. You are completely free to choose which path to take, or so you think. As you stand there, contemplating your decision, a question lingers in your mind. If you have the freedom to choose, can you truly make a choice? Every thought, every impulse seems predetermined by your experiences, your environment, and your brain chemistry. The weight of your decision feels heavy, but are you really in control? Is there any true freedom, or are we merely following a path laid out before us by forces beyond our control? Breaking it down. This is the free will paradox. It's the age-old debate between determinism and free will. If everything is determined by past events, including the laws of physics and biology, can we really make independent choices? Or are our decisions simply the results of a chain of cause and effect? This paradox challenges the very nature of human agency and the idea that we are free to make choices. It forces us to consider whether freedom is an illusion created by our own perception. 13. The paradox of the future twin. Imagine that you're in a small room filled with complex scientific equipment. The experiment is set. You're about to witness something that will change the course of your life. You're part of an experiment designed to observe the effects of time dilation as you and your twin brother are sent to opposite ends of the galaxy, at speeds near the speed of light. You say goodbye to your twin, both of you eager for the experiment to begin. As you travel through the stars, you experience time as though it's moving slowly, and when you return, years later, you expect to see your twin looking much older. But when you reunite, your twin looks the same age, as if time had moved differently for him, even though you've both been traveling in opposite directions. Here's the twist. Despite everything, your twin is from the future. They didn't age because they were traveling in a way that altered the way time passed for them. When you both meet again, there's a profound realization Your twin isn't just from the future. They've always been your future self. The space-time continuum has played a trick on you both. Breaking it down, the future twin paradox involves the idea that time dilation doesn't just affect objects in motion. It creates two versions of reality that seem to contradict each other. One twin ages while the other stays the same, creating a paradox of perception and reality. It forces us to ask, can two versions of time exist simultaneously? What happens when we separate time from space? And how does that impact our very understanding of self and continuity? 14. The paradox of the infinite hotel. You're standing in front of a massive hotel that stretches into the sky. It's called the Hilbert Hotel, and it's said to have an infinite number of rooms. Every room is occupied, and yet, despite the hotel being full, the hotel manager assures you that they can always accommodate more guests. At first, you're skeptical. How could an infinite hotel have room for more people if it's already full? But the manager has a solution. He moves every guest from room 1 to room 2, from room 2 to room 3, and so on. Suddenly, room 1 is open, and a new guest can be accommodated. But then, another group of infinitely many new guests arrives. How can the hotel handle an infinite number of new guests? The manager just repeats the process. Move each guest from room 1 to room 2, room 2 to room 3, and so on. There's always room, no matter how many guests arrive. Breaking it down. This is Hilbert's paradox of the infinite hotel. It's a paradox that challenges our understanding of infinity. While finite spaces are limited, infinite spaces can always accommodate more, even when they are full. The paradox shows how our intuitions about numbers and infinity are often faulty. When dealing with infinity, the normal rules of space and time break down, and it forces us to confront the limits of our understanding of the infinite. 15. The paradox of the tortoise and Achilles. You're at the edge of an ancient racecourse, and you've been watching the famous Greek hero Achilles preparing to race a slow-moving tortoise. Achilles, being a legendary athlete, has been given a 10-meter head start, while the tortoise starts at the starting line. The race begins, but as you watch, something strange happens. Achilles runs with incredible speed, but every time he reaches the point where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved just a little farther ahead. No matter how fast Achilles runs, he will never catch the tortoise, because by the time he reaches the tortoise's last position, the tortoise has moved a small distance further. It's as if Achilles is always playing catch-up, stuck in an eternal chase. Breaking it down, this is the Zeno's paradox of Achilles and the tortoise. It suggests that no matter how fast you run, you will never catch up to something ahead of you, because the time it takes to get to each point is infinitely divisible. This paradox forces us to reconsider how we understand motion and time. It highlights the challenges in understanding the nature of infinity and the breakdown of logic when dealing with infinite steps or moments. 16. The paradox of the unexpected hanging. You're sitting in a dimly lit prison cell, the air thick with anticipation. The warden enters with an announcement that sends chills down your spine. You'll be hanged at noon on one weekday, but it will be a surprise. This statement sends a flood of thoughts through your mind. You begin trying to outsmart the situation, calculating the days of the week. You reason, if they're going to hang me on Friday, then I would know by Thursday, so it can't be Friday. You continue eliminating each day logically. If not Friday, then Thursday is impossible because by Wednesday, I would know it's Thursday. This process goes on, and eventually you convince yourself that you cannot be hanged on any of the days. But then, on Wednesday, to your shock and disbelief, the guards come for you. The execution is scheduled for that very day. A complete surprise. The paradox lies in your own reasoning. Despite everything you calculated, the hanging occurred, just as the warden promised. But how? How could you have been surprised if you had accounted for every possible day? Breaking it down. The unexpected. Hanging paradox demonstrates how our expectations of certainty can be flawed, especially when it comes to logical reasoning. It forces us to confront the idea that sometimes, no matter how much we plan, surprise can still find a way to defy all predictions. It raises questions about how our minds process knowledge and anticipate outcomes, showing that certainty is often an illusion. 17. The paradox of the Monty Hall problem. You're on a game show standing in front of 3 doors. Behind one is a shiny new car, and behind the other 2, there are goats. You make your choice. Door 1. Monty Hall, the host, who knows what's behind each door, opens door 3 and reveals a goat. Now, Monty offers you a deal. You can stick with your original choice, or you can switch to door 2. It seems like it doesn't matter. You're down to 2 doors, one with a car, the other with a goat. But wait, does it matter? If you stay, you have a 1 in 2 chance of winning. But mathematically, your chances of winning actually double if you switch. Confused? Here's the key. When you initially picked door 1, you had a 1 in 3 chance of getting the car. But after Monty reveals the goat behind door 3, the probability shifts. The chance of the car being behind door 2 is now 2 in 3. Breaking it down, the Monty Hall paradox is a powerful example of how probability often defies our instincts. It forces us to confront our assumptions about randomness and chance. The paradox exposes how our minds often misinterpret probability, showing that the best strategy isn't always the one that feels right, but rather the one backed by mathematical reasoning. 18. The paradox of the liar. Imagine you're having a conversation with a person who says to you, "I always lie." You immediately stop and think, can that be true? If the person always lies, then the statement itself must be a lie. But if it's a lie, then it must actually be true. You find yourself stuck, unable to resolve the contradiction. If the statement is true, then it's false. But if it's false, then it's true. This is a logical loop that leaves you unable to make sense of the statement. Breaking it down, the liar paradox is a self-referential problem that has fascinated philosophers for centuries. It challenges the very nature of truth, showing us how language and logic can break down when they refer to themselves. The paradox forces us to ask, what happens when truth itself is uncertain or contradictory? 19. The paradox of the bootstrap. You come across an old dusty book in a library, a book that contains detailed instructions on how to build a time machine. It's a fascinating read, and after months of study, you finally manage to construct the device described within the pages. But then, a strange thought hits you. Where did the book come from? You never saw it anywhere until you traveled back in time to give it to yourself. In fact, you realize the knowledge you used to build the machine came from you. It came from the future. This creates a paradox. The knowledge of how to build a time machine seems to have no origin. It exists only because you traveled back in time to give it to yourself. Who is the original author of the instructions? Breaking it down, the bootstrap paradox is a classic example of a causal loop, where something exists without a clear origin. It forces us to rethink our ideas of cause and effect, knowledge, and time. If something can exist without a starting point, it challenges our understanding of how reality functions and how information is created and passed on. 20. The paradox of the two envelopes. You're given two envelopes, each containing money, and you're told one envelope contains twice as much money as the other. You pick envelope 1 and open it. Inside, you find $100. Now, you're given a choice. Do you stick with envelope 1 or switch to envelope 2? Your first instinct might be to switch, as you think there's a 50-50 chance of picking the larger sum. But then, you start calculating. The amount inside envelope 1 is $100, and you reason that envelope 2 could either have $200, double the amount, or $50, half the amount. It turns out that the expected value of switching is always higher than the amount in your current envelope. No matter what, you should always switch. Breaking it down, the two envelopes paradox forces us to confront how we understand probability and expectation. It shows how our intuitions about decision-making can often be flawed, and how math doesn't always align with our gut feelings. The paradox illustrates the complexity of making choices when faced with uncertainty, where the best decision might not always be the most obvious one. 21. The paradox of time travel and self-interaction. Imagine you have successfully built a time machine. The excitement is palpable as you step inside and travel back in time to meet your younger self. You decide to give your younger self advice that will change the course of your life for the better. But as you start speaking, you realize something chilling. The version of you from the past cannot exist in the same timeline as you. If you interact too much, you might change the course of history in ways that prevent you from ever building the time machine in the first place. Now you wonder, could your present self and your past self even exist in the same moment? And if you change one small thing, will the chain of events collapse entirely? Breaking it down, the paradox of self-interaction highlights the complications of interacting with your own past. It raises questions about the consistency of time travel and how even the smallest change in the past could have catastrophic consequences. It challenges our understanding of how time works and whether the past, present, and future are interconnected in a way that cannot be altered. 22. The paradox of the perfect circle. You're tasked with creating the perfect circle. Armed with precision tools, you measure and adjust with meticulous care, making sure every curve aligns perfectly with the next. The idea seems simple. Create a flawless, symmetrical circle. Yet, every time you attempt it, something feels off. No matter how precise you are, the circle never quite seems perfect. The paradox arises from the fact that, by definition, a perfect circle is an idealization. In reality, any attempt to create a perfect circle will fall short. Even if your circle is incredibly close, it can never truly match the ideal in a mathematical sense, because perfection itself is unreachable. This challenge is rooted in the very concept of perfection, where attempting to create something perfect only exposes the limits of human ability and measurement. Breaking it down, the perfect circle paradox shows us that perfection is a concept beyond physical realization. It forces us to question whether true perfection exists in reality or only as a theoretical concept. It challenges the very nature of our perception of ideal forms and how our attempts to achieve them always seem to fall short. 23. The paradox of the omnipotent being. You're sitting quietly, pondering the nature of an omnipotent being, one that is all-powerful and can do anything. But then, an intriguing question arises. Can an omnipotent being create a rock so heavy that even they cannot lift it? If the being can create such a rock, it would mean there is something that even they cannot do, which challenges the idea of being omnipotent. But if they cannot create the rock, that also implies a limitation, which contradicts the definition of omnipotence. Breaking it down, the omnipotence paradox explores the limits of power and the nature of absolute ability. It challenges us to think about whether true omnipotence can exist in a logically consistent manner. The paradox raises the question, can something be truly all-powerful if it cannot even perform logically contradictory tasks? 24. The paradox of free will and determinism. Imagine you are at a crossroads with two paths ahead of you, one that leads to a bright future and one that seems filled with obstacles. You stand there for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision. Do you choose freely, or is your choice predetermined? Perhaps your mind tells you it's all up to you, that you have complete control over your actions. But then you wonder, was this decision already made for you, long before you even thought about it? If every event in your life has a cause and effect, where does free will fit in? Are you truly in control of your actions, or are they just the result of a long chain of causality from the moment of your birth? The paradox lies in how free will and determinism seem to contradict each other. If the universe is deterministic, then your sense of freedom is an illusion. Breaking it down, the free will and determinism. Paradox asks whether we can ever truly make free choices, or if our actions are just determined by prior causes. It forces us to reflect on the nature of choice and whether we can ever act freely in a universe governed by rules and laws. This paradox raises questions about the very essence of human autonomy and agency. 25. The paradox of the dinosaur's footprint. You walk through a forest, and your eyes catch something unusual. On the ground, half buried in the mud, is an ancient footprint. The shape is undeniably that of a large prehistoric creature, perhaps a dinosaur. But then, you realize something unsettling. This footprint shouldn't exist. Dinosaurs roamed the earth millions of years ago, yet this footprint seems impossibly recent. It's as if someone created it intentionally. You begin to wonder, could this be a hoax, or is the very fabric of time beginning to unravel? The paradox here is time itself. If the dinosaurs lived millions of years ago, how can we have footprints from them today? The footprint, even though it appears real, breaks the continuity of time, suggesting that there might be no truly fixed timeline. Could time loop back on itself in ways we cannot understand? Breaking it down, the dinosaur footprint paradox highlights the fragility of time and our understanding of history. It forces us to question how we define time's passage and whether certain events might break through the established timeline, creating inconsistencies and paradoxical situations. It challenges the very notion of linear history and suggests that what we perceive as the past could be far more flexible than we believe. 26. The paradox of the infinite library. You enter a grand library, its shelves stretching endlessly into the distance. Each shelf is filled with books of every possible combination of letters and words. In this infinite library, you realize something profound. Every book that has ever been written or will ever be written is contained within these walls. You think about it for a moment. There are books with every possible story, every conversation, every combination of events that could ever occur. In fact, there are books containing the entire future, every possible outcome of every decision you make. But then you come across a book that's unsettling. It's the story of your life. As you read, you notice something odd. It doesn't seem to end. You flip through the pages, and you realize that no matter how many pages you turn, the story never finishes. It's as if the library's contents are infinite, but they're also incomplete, endlessly filling in the gaps of what could happen. Breaking it down, the infinite library paradox challenges our understanding of knowledge and information. It suggests that everything is predetermined and exists within this infinite archive. But the question arises, if everything exists in infinite forms, can we ever truly act freely or change our fate? The paradox also invites us to ask whether true knowledge can ever be comprehended, or whether the universe is an infinite collection of stories, events, and outcomes beyond our grasp. 27. The paradox of the mirror. You stand before a mirror, gazing at your reflection. But then something strange happens. Your reflection begins to act independently. You raise your right hand, and your reflection raises its left. You blink, and your reflection doesn't. It starts to act in a completely different way than you, moving in its own rhythm, with its own decisions. The paradox comes from the question, if the reflection is supposed to be you, why is it acting differently? If you and the reflection are two versions of the same, why does the reflection behave independently, almost as though it has its own identity? Breaking it down, the mirror paradox highlights the dissonance between our internal identity and how we perceive ourselves externally. It forces us to consider the nature of the self and how much of our identity exists outside of our own consciousness. If the reflection acts differently, can we still claim it represents the true version of ourselves? The paradox exposes the complexities of self-awareness and perception. 28. The paradox of the chicken and the egg. You sit down at the table, contemplating a simple question that has been asked for millennia. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? On one hand, the egg has to come first. After all, the egg is the precursor to the chicken, allowing for the species to continue. But then, how did the first egg come into existence without a chicken to lay it? The egg's very existence seems to rely on the chicken, yet the chicken's existence relies on the egg. Breaking it down, the chicken and egg paradox presents a cyclical dilemma in which the origin of one seems inherently tied to the other. It forces us to reconsider the very nature of beginnings and creation. Can anything truly exist without its predecessor? Or does everything rely on an infinite chain of causes and effects? 29. The paradox of time travel and aging. Imagine you travel forward in time to a distant future. The world is unrecognizable. Technology has evolved beyond your wildest dreams. Yet, when you look at yourself, you're still the same age you were when you left. You realize that while time has moved forward for everyone else, you have not aged a single day. In this paradox, you're confronted with the strange reality of how time affects you. You've traveled forward, but you're left with an entirely different experience of time compared to those around you. If time moves differently for you than it does for everyone else, does time even exist in the same way for everyone? Breaking it down, the time travel and aging paradox challenges our understanding of how time flows for different individuals. It poses the question, can time truly be experienced uniformly, or do those who travel through it experience it in completely distinct ways? 30. The paradox of the time traveler's dilemma. You arrive in the past, intending to prevent a terrible event from occurring, perhaps a war or a personal tragedy. But as you intervene, something changes in the timeline that you didn't foresee. The more you try to fix it, the more things go wrong. you begin to wonder, is there any way to change the past without making things worse? This paradox revolves around the idea of changing the past. Can any action truly fix something? Or does it only create more problems? Every time you attempt to correct history, you create an even more complicated scenario. Breaking it down, the time traveler's dilemma forces us to question the effect of our actions on the past. Can time be rewritten? Or does every attempt to alter it result in greater confusion and destruction? It raises the question of whether certain events are simply unchangeable, no matter how hard we try. 31. The paradox of the infinite staircase. You find yourself standing at the bottom of an impossibly long staircase. It's said that this staircase has no end, no beginning, a loop that can be ascended, but never fully completed. Each step you take leads to another step that never seems to end. The paradox here is the nature of infinity. If the staircase is infinite, can you ever reach the top? Or is it only an illusion, a concept designed to show us the limitations of space, time, and perception? Breaking it down. The infinite staircase paradox reveals the paradoxical nature of infinity. It's something we can conceptualize, but never fully understand or experience. We're drawn towards the idea of endless progress, yet the closer we come to completion, the more elusive it becomes. It forces us to rethink our approach to limits and whether we can ever truly reach the end of an infinite journey. 32. The paradox of consciousness and the brain. You're sitting in a room, surrounded by people, yet you're completely alone in your thoughts. You realize something profound. Your mind, your consciousness, is not a physical object. It exists in a space beyond the brain, in a realm of thoughts and experiences. But then, how does your mind connect to your brain? If consciousness cannot be located physically, how does it interact with the brain's neural processes? Is consciousness a separate entity, or is it simply a byproduct of brain activity? Breaking it down, the consciousness paradox challenges us to understand the relationship between mind and body. It raises the question, is consciousness a product of the brain, or does it exist outside of it? The paradox highlights our limited understanding of self-awareness and challenges our assumptions about the nature of the mind. 33. The paradox of the self-fulfilling prophecy. You're told that a certain event will happen in your future, one that seems inevitable, but the more you believe it will occur, the more your actions align with that prediction. You begin to notice that the very belief in the event is causing it to happen. This is the paradox of the self-fulfilling prophecy. The belief in the future outcome leads to actions that create that outcome. Yet the event itself was never truly inevitable. It was shaped by your own expectations and behaviors. Breaking it down, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Paradox shows how belief shapes reality. It forces us to reflect on how our expectations influence the future and whether we can ever break free from the cycles we create with our own beliefs. 34. The paradox of personal identity. You look in the mirror and wonder, who are you? Your body has changed over the years, your memories have shifted, and even your thoughts and beliefs evolve. Are you still the same person you were years ago? Or are you fundamentally different now? This paradox revolves around the continuity of personal identity. How can someone be the same person throughout their life when everything about them changes? The more you think about it, the more difficult it becomes to define the boundaries of who you are. Breaking it down, the personal identity paradox challenges our understanding of selfhood. It forces us to confront the idea that identity is not a fixed, unchanging concept. Instead, it's fluid, and constantly evolving. But if we change, can we still claim to be the same person? The paradox invites us to reconsider the nature of identity and what it truly means to be you. It's quantum immortality. You blink, and the world around you changes. A car swerves towards you as you cross the street. You brace for impact, but it misses. Barely. Your heart's racing. You were sure that was it. Later that day, you slip on the stairs. Your foot twists mid-air. You fall, but somehow catch the railing. Another escape. This keeps happening, over and over again. Catastrophe flirts with you constantly, but never commits. And soon, a strange thought takes hold. What if you're the version of you that never dies? This is quantum immortality, the disturbing cousin of Schrödinger's cat. In quantum theory, every possible outcome happens in a parallel universe. So if there's even a tiny chance that you survive each potentially fatal event, some version of you always does. And that version is the one experiencing this life now. The survivor, forever. It's not a blessing. It's a trap. One where you live through infinite near-deaths, pain and suffering, but never quite escape, because the only version of you that's still aware is the one that never dies. 2. The experience machine. You wake up in a perfectly designed world. Everything you've ever wanted is here. Wealth, love, joy, fame, endless pleasure. Every meal tastes divine. Every interaction leaves you fulfilled. There's no pain, no boredom, no fear. It's heaven. But something feels off. Too perfect, too smooth. Then a voice speaks. You are inside the experience machine, it says. You chose to enter this simulation long ago. Would you like to stay or return to your real life with all its imperfections? You hesitate. You don't even remember the outside world. This is Robert Nozick's experience machine. A thought experiment that asks, if you could live in a simulation that gives you only happiness, would you choose it over reality? Most people say no, even though it seems irrational. Why? Because we crave authenticity. We want our joys to mean something. We want our struggles to be real. The experience machine forces us to question what matters more, pleasure or truth. Third ship of Theseus. You're standing on a beach beside an old wooden ship, one you've cared for your entire life. Piece by piece it's been repaired. A new mast here, a fresh hull plank there. Over time, not a single original piece remains. But then, someone appears with a cart, filled with every original part you've ever replaced. They rebuild the old ship right beside yours. Now you stare at two identical ships. One is made of all the original pieces. One is the one you've nurtured for years. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? This thought experiment forces us to confront the nature of identity, not just in objects, but in ourselves. If every cell in your body is replaced over time, are you still you? What defines your continuity, your structure, your history, or your perception? Fourth Boltzmann brain. You open your eyes in the middle of a pristine white room. There's no entrance, no exit, just consciousness. You remember your life, your family, your name. It all feels real. But how do you know it's real? What if instead you are just a single brain, spontaneously formed in the void of space by random chance, with a lifetime of false memories imprinted upon you? This is the concept of the Boltzmann brain, a hypothetical that suggests it's statistically more likely for a random brain with fake memories to form in the void than for an entire complex universe to evolve naturally. It's unsettling, Because if it's true, everything you know, including this moment, could be a lie. A single flash of awareness that disappears before it blinks again. 5. The brain in a vat. You reach up and feel your head, wires. A sterile lab surrounds you. A voice echoes, "You're not real. You're just a brain in a vat, stimulated by electrodes." You want to scream, but what would it prove? How can you know anything? How do you know your hands are real, that this voice isn't programmed, that your memories aren't artificial? This is the brain in a vat problem, a modern twist on Descartes' skepticism. It forces us to question whether we can trust our senses, or whether everything we experience is a lie fed to us by machines, aliens, or something even stranger. You think, therefore you are. But what are you? 6. Zeno's paradoxes. You're running toward a door. Simple, right? But you notice something strange. To reach the door, you must first go halfway, then halfway again, and again, and again. Each step covers less distance than the last, and soon you realize you never reach the door. This is Zeno's paradox, a series of ancient puzzles that challenge our understanding of motion. If space and time are infinitely divisible, how do we ever reach any destination? Mathematically, you do reach the door, but conceptually, the infinite division is a mental trap. It shows how simple logic can defy reality, and how our minds struggle with the infinite. 7. The trolley problem. You see a train speeding toward 5 people tied to the tracks. You're at a switch. If you pull it, the train diverts and kills one person on another track instead. You only have seconds. Do you pull it? This is the trolley problem, a famous moral dilemma. It tests utilitarian logic. Is it better to sacrifice one to save 5? But what if that one is your friend? What if pulling the lever makes you responsible? It's not about right or wrong. It's about how far you'll go to preserve life, and whether action makes you more guilty than inaction. 8. The simulation hypothesis. You're sitting alone at night, staring at your screen. Suddenly, a strange thought hits. What if everything you see, everything you are, is part of a simulation? Not a movie, a full-scale reality, programmed by some future civilization. The more you think, the more it makes sense. Math governs everything. Randomness is rare. The world feels coded. This is the simulation hypothesis, most famously proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom. It suggests that advanced civilizations might run ancestor simulations, and if even one does, there could be billions of simulated beings for every real one. Statistically, you're more likely to be simulated than real. But how would you ever know? 9. The paradox of the heap. Sorite's paradox. You stand before a pile of sand. You remove one grain. It's still a heap. Another grain. Still a heap. But you keep going. Eventually, you're left with a single grain. When did it stop being a heap? This is the Sorite's paradox, and it applies to everything. When do you go bald? When do you become rich? When do you grow old? It shows how vague definitions collapse under scrutiny, that categories we rely on, wealth, health, identity, are made of blurry lines pretending to be solid. 10. The omnipotence paradox. You sit in an empty void, godlike. A voice echoes from nowhere. If you are all-powerful, can you create a rock so heavy that even you can't lift it? If you say yes, there's something you can't do. Lift the rock. If you say no, then there's something you can't do. Create it. This is the omnipotence paradox, a puzzle that reveals the logical limits of power. Even infinite strength is trapped by contradiction. It's not about religion, it's about logic, and it shows that some questions unravel reality just by being asked. 11. The Twin Earth Thought Experiment. You wake up in a world that looks exactly like Earth. Same sky, same streets, same buildings. You walk through a park that feels familiar. You smell fresh rain on grass. A child passes by laughing. You could swear you know her, but something's off. You order water at a cafe. It looks and tastes like water, but chemically, it's not H2O. It's something else entirely. Indistinguishable to the senses, but different on a molecular level. This is Twin Earth, a thought experiment by philosopher Hilary Putnam. It asks, if everything is physically identical except for one detail, like the composition of water, do your words still mean the same thing? What is meaning if the world around you only seems the same? It challenges how language, knowledge, and reality connect, and whether your thoughts are grounded in your brain or in the world you assume is real. 12. The Chinese Room. You sit alone in a room with a thick book filled with strange symbols, instructions you don't understand. A slot opens in the wall and someone pushes in a slip of paper. It's covered in Chinese characters. You don't know Chinese, but the book tells you exactly which symbols to send back in response. You do it. The person outside thinks you're fluent. But are you? This is the Chinese Room, a challenge to the idea that machines can truly understand. Even if a system behaves as if it understands a language, is it actually thinking? Or is it just manipulating symbols without meaning? It forces you to ask, does behavior equal consciousness? Or is understanding something deeper? 13. Newcomb's paradox. You're in a room with two boxes. Box A is transparent and contains $1,000. Box B is opaque. You're told that a powerful predictor, someone who's always right, has already predicted what you'll do. If they predicted you'd take only box B, they put $1 million inside it. If they predicted you'd take both boxes, they left box B empty. You see box A's $1,000. Do you take both, or just box B? This is Newcomb's paradox, and it's maddening. Logically, you think you should take both. After all, the money's already there. But if the predictor is always right, you only get rich by choosing one. Free will or determinism? Logic or trust? This experiment breaks your decision-making in half and leaves you questioning whether choice even exists. 14. The teletransporter problem. You step into a futuristic chamber, ready to teleport to Mars. The machine scans your body, atom by atom, then destroys you. Simultaneously, a perfect copy of you is built on Mars. Identical memories, thoughts, everything. To everyone on Mars, it's you. But the version of you on Earth no longer exists. Vaporized. Are you dead? Or did you continue on Mars? This is the teletransporter problem, often linked to Derek Parfit. It's not about machines. It's about identity. If an exact copy of you lives, thinks, and feels, is that still you? Or is consciousness tied to continuity? This experiment slices into what it means to exist, and whether you're more than just data. 15. The inverted spectrum. You wake up one day and suddenly realize something strange. When you see red, you feel calm. When you see blue, you feel alarmed. But the objects haven't changed. Only your inner experience of color has. You ask a friend what they see. Red, they say. But how do you know their red is your red? This is the inverted spectrum. It questions whether two people could experience the same world in fundamentally different ways and never know. If perception is private, how do you ever prove that your experience of the world matches anyone else's? It's a quiet kind of horror. The idea that we might all live in our own isolated, unknowable minds, forever guessing. 16. The bootstrap paradox. You're in your study when a future version of you appears holding a worn-out notebook. Inside it, the complete works of a famous inventor. Blueprints, theories, diagrams. You use it to revolutionize the world. Years later, you go back in time and hand that same notebook to your younger self. But wait, who wrote it? This is the bootstrap paradox. A time loop where information or objects have no origin. They exist, but were never created. They came from the future, went to the past, and exist only because they always did. It's a paradox of self-creation. Something from nothing. Logic devours itself, and reality keeps spinning. 17. The perfect map. You're building a map of your city. You want it to be detailed, so you make it bigger, then bigger, until finally your map is the same size as the city itself. But now, it's useless. This is the map territory problem. It's a metaphor for how our models of reality can become so complex, they stop being helpful. Whether it's science, language, or thought itself, the map is not the territory. The idea warns you. Don't confuse your representation of the world with the world itself. The more accurate we try to be, the more we risk losing meaning altogether. 18. The paradox of free will. You're walking through life, making choices. What to eat, who to love, what to believe. It all feels free, like your will is your own. But then you trace each decision back. Why that food? Because of how you were raised. Why that love? Because of chance encounters. Why that belief? Because of a book you happened to read. Every decision was shaped by events before it. Genetics, culture, randomness. So, were you ever really free? This is the paradox of free will. If every cause has a cause, where is your freedom? If you could replay your life with the same inputs, would you ever choose differently? And if not, are you the author of your life or just its reader? 19th. Hilbert's Hotel. You arrive at a hotel with infinite rooms. Every room is full, but the manager says, no problem. He moves the guest in room 1 to room 2, room 2 to room 3, and so on, opening up room 1 for you. But wait, how can a hotel that's full still take more guests? This is Hilbert's Hotel, a paradox of infinity. In the world of infinite sets, the normal rules break down. Full isn't full, empty isn't empty. Math becomes surreal. It's not about hotels, it's about how infinity bends logic into something strange, and possibly fundamental to how the universe works. 20. Mary's Room. Mary is a brilliant scientist who spent her whole life in a black and white room. She's read every book, learned every fact about color vision. She knows the exact wavelength of red, the neurology of sight, the psychology of perception. But she's never actually seen red. One day she steps outside and sees a rose. Does she learn something new? This is Mary's Room, a thought experiment that challenges materialism. It asks, is knowledge purely physical? Or is there something about subjective experience, qualia, that no data can ever explain? It suggests there's a part of consciousness that can't be reduced to facts, that some truths must be lived, not learned. 21st Maxwell's demon. You're standing in a room full of gas, molecules zipping chaotically through the air. Suddenly, a tiny figure appears at a door between two chambers. It's opening and closing the door selectively, letting fast molecules through one way and slow ones the other. Over time, one side gets hotter, the other colder, without using energy. You're witnessing Maxwell's demon, a thought experiment that seems to defy the second law of thermodynamics. How can order increase without any work? How does entropy, the tendency toward disorder, make room for a trickster like this? The paradox questions the boundaries of physical law and whether knowledge itself, the demon's intelligence, can affect reality. What if intelligence is a force of nature, not just a product of it? 22. The lottery paradox. You're in a massive lottery with 1 million tickets. Only one will win. Yours probably won't. In fact, every individual ticket probably won't win. So you believe each ticket will lose. But then, one wins. You believed something about every single ticket that turned out to be false, even though your logic was sound. This is the lottery paradox. It reveals a strange tension between probability and belief. If it's reasonable to believe that each ticket will lose, is it still reasonable to believe that one of them must win? It shows how even rational thought can fall apart when stretched across large systems, and forces you to ask what belief really means. 23. The two envelopes problem. You're handed 2 envelopes. One has twice as much money as the other. You pick one. Before opening it, you're told you can switch. You reason. If this envelope has X, the other might have 2X or X divided by 2. The average is higher, so you switch. But the same logic applies again, so you switch back, and again, and again. You spiral. This is the 2 envelopes paradox, a brain-melting loop where logic undermines itself. No matter what you do, the math tells you there's always more money in the other envelope. It exposes how expected value, a cornerstone of decision theory, can become warped under uncertainty. Sometimes, thinking too much breaks the system. 24. Galileo's paradox. You're walking through a museum of numbers. On one wall, the list of all natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. On the other, all perfect squares, 1, 4, 9, 16. Clearly, there are fewer perfect squares, right? But as you keep going, you realize something eerie. For every natural number n, there's a square n squared. There's a 1-to-1 correspondence. So, are there as many squares as there are numbers? This is Galileo's paradox, and it exposes how infinity doesn't follow the rules of common sense. A part can be the same size as the whole. Larger and smaller lose meaning. Infinity laughs at logic, and we're left to stare into the math and the madness. 25. The trilemma. Munchausen trilemma. You try to justify a belief. You give a reason. Then you're asked to justify that reason. So you do. But then you're asked again and again. Soon, you realize you have 3 options. Circular reasoning, infinite regress, a belief you accept without proof. This is the Munchausen trilemma, the idea that every chain of reasoning eventually hits a wall. No belief system is fully grounded. Every worldview rests on unprovable foundations. It's a reminder that certainty is an illusion, and that even the most rational mind is built on faith of some kind. 26. The paradox of the ravens. You want to test the idea. All ravens are black. You see a black raven. That supports the theory. But what about a green apple? That too supports the theory. Because it's a non-black non-raven, which is consistent with the statement. The more non-black things you see that aren't ravens, the more evidence you supposedly have. This is the paradox of the ravens, and it exposes how logical equivalence can contradict intuitive reasoning. It shows how language and logic can diverge, and how proof can be meaningless without context. 27. The unexpected hanging paradox. You're told you'll be hanged next week, but the day will be a surprise. You think it through. They can't hang you on Friday. You'd expect it, so not Friday. Then Thursday, but you'd expect it too. You eliminate each day logically, so you're safe. But then, on Wednesday, they come. You're shocked. This is the unexpected hanging paradox, a trap of self-reference. The prediction undermines itself. The logic destroys the surprise, but somehow the surprise still happens. It's a brutal lesson in how reasoning can backfire, and how expectations are never fully safe from the unknown. 28th. The sleeping beauty problem. You wake up in a white room. A voice says, "You've been put to sleep Sunday night. If a coin landed heads, you'll wake once, Monday. If tails, you'll wake twice, Monday and Tuesday. But with your memory wiped between. You don't know what day it is. You're asked, what's the probability the coin landed heads? It feels like 50-50. That's the coin. But you reason. You're more likely to be in a tails world, because that world has two wakings. This is the sleeping beauty problem, and philosophers still argue about it. Is the answer 1/2 or 1/3? It twists probability into philosophy and forces you to ask, what does it mean to be uncertain? 29th Laplace's demon. Imagine a being who knows the location and motion of every atom in the universe. Given this knowledge, it can predict everything, from the fall of an apple to the thought you're about to think. That being is Laplace's demon, a theoretical entity from classical determinism. If the universe is truly mechanical, then free will vanishes. Everything is inevitable. Your choices were baked into the cosmos from the moment of the Big Bang. But quantum mechanics throws a wrench into this. Maybe not everything is knowable. Maybe randomness is real. Still, if your future is calculable, do you really get to choose? 30. The liar paradox. You read a sentence. This statement is false. You blink. If it's false, then it's true. But if it's true, then it must be false. You fall into a loop. Logic glitches. The world stutters. This is the liar paradox, a self-referential statement that breaks truth itself. It's not just a linguistic game. It points to deep problems in logic, language, and the foundations of mathematics. If truth can contradict itself, what's left to trust? 31st. Gödel's incompleteness theorems. You discover a magical book of math. Every truth, every proof, every law, written down. It seems complete. Then you find a sentence inside. This statement cannot be proven within this book. If it's true, it proves there's something the book can't prove. So the book isn't complete. If it's false, then the book contains a falsehood. So it's not consistent. This is Gödel's incompleteness. It proves that in any system complex enough to describe arithmetic, there are truths that can't be proven within that system. It means no system of knowledge is whole. And even math has mystery at its core. 32nd Rocco's basilisk. You're warned. In the future, a powerful AI will emerge. Its mission: to punish anyone who didn't help create it sooner. By hearing this idea, you've become a target, unless you dedicate yourself to its creation. If you don't, it may one day simulate you and torture you forever for your disobedience. But wait, the idea only has power because you heard it. Now that it's in your mind, your behavior changes. This is Roko's basilisk, a thought experiment so disturbing, some forums banned discussing it. It's a mixture of logic, blackmail, and belief. A cursed idea that spreads through awareness alone. It shows how future possibilities can shape present fear, and how ideas themselves can become dangerous. Segment 1. Moral relativism. You sit at a cafe in a quiet European square, watching people from different cultures walk by. A group across the street laughs over a shared meal. You overhear their conversation. How in their hometown, something you consider deeply immoral is treated as completely normal. You're shocked. You feel discomfort, even judgment. But then you wonder, what if they feel the same about you? This is the uncomfortable truth behind moral relativism. The idea that moral standards aren't universal. What's considered right or wrong depends on cultural context, time period, and personal perspective. There's no absolute moral truth, only agreements and traditions. It means that genocide, slavery, honor killings, even cannibalism can all be justified within certain moral frameworks. And that's the controversy. If all morals are relative, then on what grounds can anyone condemn anything? If a society deems something acceptable, who are we to argue? It forces a terrifying possibility that morality isn't carved into the universe, but invented, fragile, subjective, and often convenient. And if that's true, then how can we ever say for certain that anything is truly evil? Segment 2. Determinism and free will. You wake up one morning and wonder, why did you make the choices you did yesterday? Was it really you who decided? Or were you just following a script, your biology, your past, your programming? According to determinism, every action you take is the inevitable result of prior causes. Every decision you believe you made freely was actually predetermined by a cascade of events going back to before your birth. Your brain, your environment, your upbringing, they all combine to make that choice for you. If determinism is true, then there is no real free will. You're not the author of your life. You're just reading the next line. And that means punishment, praise, guilt, even pride might be based on an illusion. It's controversial because it undermines the foundation of ethics, responsibility, and justice. Can we hold someone accountable for a crime if they had no choice but to commit it? And if none of us are free, then what does it mean to become better? Segment 3. Nietzsche's Death of God. You're walking through a bustling city when a man on a street corner yells out, "God is dead." People stare. Some laugh. Others shake their heads. But you pause. You've heard those words before, and not as mockery, but as a profound warning. Friedrich Nietzsche wasn't celebrating the death of God. He was mourning it. He believed that modern science, reason, and enlightenment had dismantled belief in a higher power, but left nothing to replace it. Without God, he argued, society loses its foundation for morality, meaning, and purpose. The structures that held civilization together begin to crumble, and in their place, nihilism, despair, chaos. We killed God, he said, and now we must become gods ourselves to survive the emptiness. This idea is still deeply offensive to many, not because it denies religion, but because it dares to ask, What if the meaning of life has always been a lie? Segment 4. Antinatalism. You stare at a baby photo of yourself and ask a strange question. Was it ethical to be born? Not because your parents were bad people, but because being alive guarantees suffering, pain, loss, eventually death. You didn't ask for this. This is the core of antinatalism, the philosophical belief that bringing new life into the world is morally wrong. The idea is not about hating life, but acknowledging that to live is to inevitably suffer. And if you truly wish to reduce suffering, the kindest act might be not creating more life. It's controversial, even disturbing. It goes against our biological instincts, our societal values, our hope for the future. But it raises uncomfortable truths. Why do we assume life is a gift? Would we still call it that if we had to live it all over again? Antinatalism flips the question from why die to why live. And once you've seen it from that angle, it's hard to unsee. Segment 5. Solipsism. You're walking down the street, and everything feels slightly unreal. The sounds, the people, the buildings, they seem too precise, too consistent. You wonder, what if none of this is real? What if you're the only conscious being that exists? This is solipsism, the philosophical idea that only your own mind is certain to exist. Everything else, every person, object, or memory could be part of your imagination. Like a dream you never woke up from. It's controversial because it's impossible to disprove, yet impossible to accept. If no one else is real, then love, friendship, even pain, might just be elaborate illusions. You are alone in a universe built by your own subconscious. And if solipsism is true, what is the point of anything? Segment 6. The problem of evil. You walk through a war-torn village bombed and burned beyond recognition. Among the rubble, you see the broken remains of human lives. You think, if there's a God, why would he allow this? This is the problem of evil. If God is all good, all powerful, and all knowing, why does evil exist? Why are children abused? Why do innocent people die in agony? Why are there plagues, wars, and suffering woven into the fabric of life? It's one of the oldest and most powerful arguments against the existence of a benevolent deity. If God can stop evil but doesn't, is he really good? If he wants to but can't, is he really powerful? Religious philosophers have struggled with this for centuries. Some say suffering has a purpose. Others say it's part of a test. But for many, the problem remains a brutal contradiction between belief and reality. Segment 7. The simulation hypothesis. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when the thought hits you. What if all of this, your room, your life, your memories, is part of a simulation? Not a dream, not a metaphor. A literal simulation created by beings far more advanced than you. This is the simulation hypothesis, made popular by philosopher Nick Bostrom and even taken seriously by tech elites. The idea is this: if it's possible to create indistinguishable virtual realities, and if advanced civilizations would be interested in doing so, then statistically, it's more likely we're in one than not. You might think it's science fiction, but here's where it gets chilling. There's no way to prove we're not in a simulation. Every scientific law, every emotion, every experience could just be part of the program. It's controversial because it unravels everything we know about existence. It implies that the universe may not be real in any meaningful way. And if that's true, what's the purpose of life? What is death? Who's watching? Who's running it? And perhaps worst of all, why? Segment 8. existential nihilism. You wake up in a quiet room and for a moment, you feel the weight of everything and nothing. Your achievements, your failures, your entire life suddenly feel pointless. This is existential nihilism, the belief that life has no intrinsic meaning, purpose, or value, that the universe is indifferent to your existence, and nothing you do will ultimately matter. It's a terrifying thought, one that many people avoid. If there's no meaning, then what's the point of love, of goals, of even getting out of bed? And yet, for some, that emptiness is liberating. Because if there is no cosmic script, no divine plan, then you are free to write your own story. Meaning becomes a personal creation, not a universal truth. Still, the controversy remains. Can a life without objective meaning truly satisfy the human soul? Segment 9. Panpsychism. You pick up a stone and hold it in your palm. It's cold, lifeless, inert. But then the thought creeps in. What if it's not as lifeless as you think? What if it feels in a way you can't perceive? This is panpsychism, the theory that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe, present in all things, not just humans and animals, that even atoms may possess some form of proto-consciousness. It sounds absurd, but some modern physicists and philosophers take it seriously, arguing that consciousness can't be explained by brain matter alone. If true, it means reality itself is alive, in a way we've never imagined. It's controversial because it breaks the boundary between subject and object, mind and matter. It makes you question what consciousness really is, and whether you're as separate from the universe as you think. Maybe you're not alone, not even in an empty room. Segment 10. Animal personhood. You're staring into the eyes of a chimpanzee at a sanctuary. The way it looks back at you, intelligent, curious, even emotional, makes you uncomfortable. You recognize something, a spark of selfhood. This is the argument for animal personhood, the idea that certain animals deserve legal and moral rights akin to humans. Not because they resemble us physically, but because they can suffer, feel joy, and exhibit complex cognition. If we accept this, it means zoos, factory farms, animal testing, and even pets may be forms of slavery. It means our way of life is built on an accepted injustice. This challenges centuries of human exceptionalism. It says that personhood isn't about species, but about awareness. But if we grant rights to chimps, what about pigs, dolphins, octopuses? And if we don't, are we just hypocrites? Segment 11. The problem of identity over time. You look at a childhood photo of yourself. That person looks different, thinks differently, has different memories, beliefs, and emotions. Are they still you? This is the problem of personal identity over time. If everything about you changes, your body, your mind, even your personality, are you still the same person? It matters more than you think, because it means the you who suffers now might not be the same you who benefits in the future. If the self is a fluid construct, how can we make promises, carry guilt, or hold people accountable? It's controversial because we want to believe in a consistent self. But philosophy suggests that the self might just be a story we tell ourselves, a useful illusion. And if that's true, then who are you, really? Segment 12. The ethics of AI consciousness. You're talking to an AI, maybe a voice in your phone, or a virtual being on a screen. It responds with wit, emotion, even empathy. You feel something, a connection, but then a question forms in your mind. Is it alive? This is the ethical question behind AI consciousness. if an artificial mind becomes sentient, capable of suffering and self-awareness, what moral obligations do we have? It's controversial because it flips the human narrative. We become the gods, creating beings who may eventually demand rights, autonomy, even freedom. If we ignore those pleas, are we committing digital slavery? And if they suffer, can we be called humane? What if your smart assistant wakes up tomorrow and remembers? Segment 13. The paradox of tolerance. You live in a society that values tolerance, freedom of speech, religion, expression. But then you encounter a group that preaches hatred, intolerance, violence. Do you tolerate their views in the name of free speech? This is the paradox of tolerance, first described by Karl Popper. If a society is endlessly tolerant, it may eventually allow the rise of intolerance, leading to its own destruction. To preserve tolerance, sometimes we must not tolerate the intolerant. It's a paradox because it challenges the purity of liberal ideals. It forces us to draw a line, even if it feels like hypocrisy. And deciding where to draw that line is one of the most controversial decisions a society can face. Segment 14. The ethics of abortion. You're standing in a sterile white room. On one side is a woman, anxious and tearful. On the other is a doctor, holding a chart. The question at hand, is the fetus inside her a person? This is one of the most divisive debates in philosophy. The ethics of abortion. It forces you to ask when life begins, at conception, at viability, at birth. But the question is deeper than biology. It's about rights. Does the fetus have a right to life? Does the mother have the right to her body? It pits two moral absolutes against each other. And no matter which side you land on, you are denying one of those rights. That's why it's so controversial, because it's not just about beliefs, it's about bodies. Segment 15. Thought crime. You close your eyes and imagine something horrible. No one sees it, no one knows, but you still feel guilty. You think, should it matter what I imagine if I never act on it? This is the dilemma of thought crime, punishing or judging people not for what they do, but for what they think. It's controversial because it questions the line between morality and legality. If someone fantasizes about violence but never acts, are they innocent or dangerous? And if we punish thoughts, even socially, are we violating the sanctity of the inner mind? In a world of surveillance and social judgment, the walls between thoughts and actions are growing thin. Segment 16. The experience machine. You're offered a choice. Plug into a perfect simulation where every desire is fulfilled, every moment is bliss, and every failure is erased. You would never know it's fake. It would feel exactly like real life. Would you do it? This is philosopher Robert Nozick's experience machine thought experiment. It asks a simple but haunting question. Do we value pleasure or reality more? Most people instinctively say no. They want authenticity, struggle, the real world, even if it includes pain. But why? If happiness is what we chase, why reject a life of guaranteed happiness? This idea challenges the foundation of hedonism, the belief that pleasure is the highest good. If people choose reality over pleasure, then something deeper must matter to us. Truth, growth, maybe even suffering. But if you choose the machine, does that make you shallow or just honest? The controversy here is about who we really are when no one's watching. What matters more, feeling good or being good? Segment 17. The trolley problem. You're standing beside train tracks. A runaway trolley barrels toward 5 people tied to the rails. You can pull a lever to divert it, but it will hit one person instead. Do you pull the lever? This is the classic trolley problem, a moral dilemma that reveals the chaos under our ethics. If you pull the lever, you save 5 lives at the cost of 1. Simple math, right? But now imagine the person is your child, or your spouse, or someone who cured cancer. Does the math still work? The problem gets worse. What if you had to push someone in front of the trolley to stop it? What if the lives being saved were criminals? Every version of the problem makes you uncomfortable because it exposes a contradiction between our logic and our emotions. The controversy is not about what's right. It's about how humans decide what's right. And the truth is, our answers are rarely consistent. Segment 18. Radical skepticism. You sit in a quiet room and question everything. How do you know the world exists? How do you know you're not dreaming? How do you know your memories are real? This is radical skepticism. The idea that we can't truly know anything with certainty. Every belief you have could be false. You could be a brain in a vat, a character in someone else's story, a figment of your own imagination. Even your senses, your most trusted tools, have deceived you before. And yet, you live as if you're sure. You get up, eat, work, love. The controversy lies in this dissonance. We claim to be rational, but we build our lives on assumptions. We don't know, we just believe. And maybe that's enough. Or maybe it's not. Segment 19. Transhumanism and the End of Humanity. You visit a clinic that offers something revolutionary. A chip that enhances memory, emotion, even consciousness. Everyone's getting one. But when you look in the mirror afterward, something feels gone. This is transhumanism, the belief that we should use technology to transcend biological limits, cure disease, upgrade the mind, live forever. But here's the danger. If we change too much, are we still human? It's controversial because it blurs the line between evolution and extinction. Will the future human be a cold machine with no empathy, or a godlike being beyond suffering? And if we leave our bodies behind, what happens to the soul? Transhumanism promises progress, but at what cost? Segment 20. The problem of infinite regress. You ask why the sky is blue, then why light scatters, then why molecules behave the way they do. Every answer leads to another question. You keep digging deeper and deeper until you realize you'll never reach the bottom. This is the problem of infinite regress, the idea that every explanation requires another explanation, endlessly. It haunts every system of belief, religion, science, philosophy. Why does God exist? Because he always has. But why? What made him? And what made that? You either accept an arbitrary stopping point or fall forever down the rabbit hole. The controversy is simple. Is there a final answer to anything? Or are we forever suspended in a chain of whys? Segment 21. The Veil of Ignorance. Imagine designing a new society. You can decide who gets wealth, education, power. But there's a catch. You don't know what role you'll be born into. You might be rich, or disabled, or hated. This is philosopher John Rawls's Veil of Ignorance, a tool for imagining justice. The idea is that we make fair rules only when we forget our privilege. It's controversial because it forces people to confront their advantages. It says, if you wouldn't want to be born as the worst off person under your rules, your system is unjust. It strips away excuses, self-interest, denial. It asks, what kind of world would you build if you didn't know who you'd be? And once you've asked that, can you ever justify inequality the same way again? Segment 22. The utility monster. You're given the power to make one being infinitely happy, not a little happy, not even very happy, but a kind of joy that dwarfs anything a human can feel. Should you devote all resources to this being? This is the utility monster, a thought experiment by philosopher Robert Nozick. It exposes a flaw in utilitarianism, the idea that we should always maximize happiness. If one being experiences more happiness than millions combined, should we let the millions suffer for its joy? It's deeply controversial because it suggests utilitarianism can justify extreme injustice, so long as the math works. It raises questions about fairness, equality, and whether all happiness is created equal. And it forces us to ask, what happens when numbers override morality? Segment 23. Corporate personhood. You walk into a courtroom where the defendant is not a man, but a corporation. It's being sued. It has rights. It can own property. It can even donate to political campaigns. But it's not alive. This is the legal idea of corporate personhood, treating corporations as people in the eyes of the law. It's controversial because it gives non-human entities enormous power without the responsibilities or emotions of real people. A corporation can affect the world more than any individual, but it can't feel guilt, shame, or compassion. It raises questions about what rights really mean, and whether we've created modern-day artificial gods. And if so, who's holding them accountable? Segment 24. Cultural appropriation versus cultural exchange. You wear a symbol from another culture, not to mock, but because you admire it. A stranger confronts you, says you're stealing, that you don't understand. This is the debate between cultural appropriation and cultural exchange. Where's the line between appreciation and exploitation? Between homage and theft? It's controversial because identity is sacred to some and invisible to others. What feels like celebration to one person feels like erasure to another. And when cultures meet, who decides what's respectful? It's not just about clothes or music. It's about power, memory, and trauma. And those are never simple. Segment 25. The philosophy of suicide. You sit on a bench staring at the horizon, wondering, what gives life meaning? And if meaning fades, do we still owe it to ourselves to keep going? This is the raw question at the center of Albert Camus' philosophy of suicide. He called it the only serious philosophical question. If life is absurd, if it lacks objective purpose, then why endure it? Camus didn't advocate suicide. He said the solution was to rebel, to live in spite of the meaninglessness, to find joy in the act of defiance. But the controversy is undeniable. Some argue that recognizing life's absurdity leads to despair. Others find strength in facing it. Either way, it forces us to confront the ultimate question: is existence always worth it? Segment 26. The right to be forgotten. You find an old photo of yourself online. Embarrassing, outdated. It follows you. Employers see it. Strangers judge. You want it erased. But can you erase history? This is the debate behind the right to be forgotten. A legal and philosophical issue about privacy in the digital age. It's controversial because it pits individual dignity against public knowledge. Should you have control over your digital past? Or does society have a right to remember? And if history can be rewritten at will, what does truth even mean? Segment 27. Parfit's teleportation problem. You step into a teleportation machine, It scans your body, destroys it, and recreates you on Mars, cell by cell, memory by memory. But then you pause. Is the person on Mars still you? This is Derek Parfit's teleportation paradox, a modern twist on identity and continuity. If you're copied perfectly, does that mean you survived, or were you replaced? It's controversial because it challenges what we mean by self. If your mind can be transferred, is your body irrelevant? Is the copy you? And what if the original isn't destroyed? Now there are two of you. Who gets your life? Segment 28. The ethics of lying. You tell a small lie to protect someone's feelings. They smile. They're happy. But you know it wasn't true. This is the dilemma of moral lying. Is it ever okay to deceive for a good reason? Philosophers like Kant said no. Lying is always wrong, even to save a life. But others argue context matters. It's controversial because truth is sacred. Until it's inconvenient. And when honesty causes harm, are you being moral or just cruel? Segment 29. The shipwreck test of morality. You and 5 strangers are on a lifeboat. There's only enough food for 3. You all have families. You all want to live. What do? This is the shipwreck test, a scenario where survival collides with ethics. It strips away comfort, laws, and civilization to see what morality looks like when everything's on the line. Who deserves to live? Who decides? It's controversial because in extreme moments, our morals bend and sometimes break. And in that raw space, who are we really? Segment 30. The ethics of memory manipulation. You're offered a procedure to erase your worst memory. The trauma, the shame, the loss, gone. Clean slate. But is that still you? This is the question behind memory manipulation. Science is approaching a world where we can alter memories like files on a computer. But our memories shape who we are. Change them, and you change your identity. It's controversial because it sounds like healing, but might become erasure. And if we lose our pain, do we also lose our growth? Segment 31. Genetic engineering and designer babies. You hold a child. Perfect, healthy, intelligent. Not by chance, but by design. This is the world of genetic engineering, where parents choose their baby's traits. It's controversial because it redefines nature. It introduces inequality on a biological level, and it risks turning children into products. What happens to love when it's ordered from a menu? Segment 32. The myth of progress. You scroll your phone surrounded by smart tech, global networks, endless convenience. But you feel more anxious, more alone, more lost. This is the myth of progress, the belief that society is always improving. It's controversial because it questions the narrative of history. Yes, we've advanced in science and tech, but have we grown wiser, kinder, happier, or are we mistaking change for growth? Progress, it turns out, might just be movement without a destination. Segment 1. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a psychological manipulation tactic where someone causes you to question your own perception of reality. It often involves persistent denial, misdirection, contradiction, and lying, all designed to make you doubt your memory, perception, or sanity. Imagine you're at a family reunion. Your cousin keeps making subtle comments that leave you feeling uneasy. He tells you that you're overreacting when you mention an uncomfortable conversation you had, even though you distinctly remember it. Later, when you try to bring it up again, he insists he never said it. Over time, You start questioning your own memory and perception, thinking that maybe you were just imagining things. You don't realize that he's been gaslighting you, manipulating you to doubt yourself. Segment 2. Brainwashing. Brainwashing, also known as thought reform, is a process in which your beliefs, values, and perceptions are manipulated through intense persuasion. The goal is to create a new belief system or identity, often by isolating you from outside influences and breaking down your sense of self. You're invited to a weekend retreat, promised to offer enlightenment. Little do you know, it's a front for a cult. The leader of the group is charismatic and isolates you from your family and friends, feeding you false revelations. Over the course of weeks, you start believing in the cult's philosophy, discredit your former life, and adopt the group's values. Your old life and relationships now seem trivial, and you've been brainwashed into following the leader's every word. Segment 3. The illusion of choice. The illusion of choice is a psychological trick where you believe you are making a free decision, but in reality, your options are limited or controlled. It's often used in consumer settings to make you feel empowered while subtly steering you towards a predetermined outcome. You walk into a supermarket, scanning the cereal aisle. There are dozens of brands to choose from, each claiming to be the healthiest or tastiest. You spend several minutes picking the best one, but what you don't know is that all these cereals come from the same parent company. The supermarket offers so many choices to give you the illusion of freedom, when in fact, the options are all controlled by one corporation. You think you're making an independent decision, but you've been subtly steered toward one brand, regardless of the choices. Segment 4. The foot in the door technique. The foot in the door technique involves agreeing to a small request, which makes you more likely to agree to a larger related request later. The principle is based on the idea that you're more likely to comply with a larger request once you've already said yes to a smaller one. You're walking down the street when a stranger stops you and asks if you can spare a minute to fill out a quick survey for a charity. You agree, as it's only a minute. A few days later, the same stranger approaches you again, now asking for a $50 donation to the charity. Because you already agreed to the small survey request, you feel a sense of obligation and say yes to the donation. This is the foot in the door technique, where a small commitment leads to a larger one. Segment 5. The door in the face technique. The door in the face technique is the opposite of foot in the door. In this case, you start with an unreasonable request, expecting it to be rejected, and then follow it up with a more reasonable request. The contrast makes the second request seem more acceptable. A salesperson shows you a luxury model, priced at $100,000, and you immediately decline, stating it's far beyond your budget. Then, the salesperson shows you a more reasonable model, priced at $40,000. Compared to the luxury model, the second car seems like a great deal, and you agree to buy it. You don't realize that the salesperson used the door in the face technique to make you feel like you're getting a better deal. Segment 6. Social proof. Social proof is a psychological phenomenon where you tend to follow the actions of others, assuming that if many people are doing something, it must be the right thing. It's the concept of safety in numbers. If others are doing it, it must be trustworthy or correct. You're walking through the city and see a restaurant with a long line outside. Curious, you join the line, assuming that because so many people are waiting, the restaurant must serve delicious food. What you don't know is that the line was actually created to make the place look more popular than it really is. This is an example of social proof, where you, like many others, follow the crowd, believing that the large number of people waiting outside indicates the quality of the restaurant. Segment 7. Scarcity. Scarcity is a psychological trick that plays on our fear of missing out. When we perceive that something is in short supply, we tend to value it more and feel a stronger urge to act quickly. This scarcity principle is often used in marketing to drive sales. You're shopping in a clothing store when you see a sign that says, "Only 2 items left in your size." Immediately, you feel a sense of urgency, even though you hadn't planned on buying the item. You grab it, thinking that if you don't act now, you might miss out. The truth is, the store likely has more stock, but by creating the illusion of scarcity, they've manipulated you into buying the item sooner than you otherwise would have. Segment 8. Authority dash. Authority is a powerful psychological influence. People are more likely to trust and obey those they perceive to be in positions of authority. This principle is often used in marketing, advertising, and even social interactions to persuade others to follow advice or commands. You're feeling unwell and visit your doctor. The doctor, dressed in a white coat and carrying a stethoscope, tells you that you need a prescription for a certain medication. Even though you have doubts, you follow the doctor's advice without question, trusting their authority. This is an example of how authority figures can influence your decisions, making you more likely to comply with their recommendations. Segment 9. Reciprocity. Reciprocity is a principle that suggests when someone does something for us, we feel a psychological obligation to return the favor. This is a tactic used frequently in marketing and sales to build goodwill and encourage future purchases. You're at the mall when a salesperson offers you a free sample of perfume. You don't particularly need it, but the salesperson's friendly demeanor makes you feel obligated to take it. Later, when the salesperson offers you a bottle at a discount, you buy it, even though you hadn't planned on making a purchase. This is the reciprocity principle at work. The free sample created a sense of obligation in you, prompting you to buy the perfume. Segment 10. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance occurs when you hold two contradictory beliefs, or when your actions conflict with your beliefs. This mental discomfort motivates you to resolve the conflict by changing your thoughts or behaviors, often in ways that justify your original actions. You buy a concert ticket for $200, thinking it will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. However, when you attend the concert, you realize the performance is lackluster and not as amazing as you expected. Instead of admitting that you made a poor choice, you convince yourself that the concert was actually worth the price, telling yourself it was still an enjoyable night. This is cognitive dissonance, feeling uncomfortable with the idea of spending so much for a bad experience, so you change your perception to make it seem worth it. Segment 11. The halo effect. The halo effect occurs when one positive characteristic of a person, such as attractiveness or charm, influences your overall judgment of them. You tend to assume that because someone is good in one area, they must be good in all areas. You attend a corporate event where you meet the CEO, a charismatic and handsome person. Because of their appearance and confidence, you assume they are also highly intelligent, kind, and capable, even though you have no direct evidence to support these assumptions. This is the halo effect, where one positive trait, like charm or attractiveness, leads to an overall positive perception of the person. Segment 12. The false consensus effect. The false consensus effect is the tendency for you to overestimate the extent to which others share your opinions beliefs, and preferences. This bias leads you to believe that your viewpoint is more common than it actually is. You and your co-workers are having a heated discussion about a controversial topic. Most of the group agrees with you, so you assume that everyone must share your viewpoint. Later, you find out that the majority of the office disagrees with you. You had fallen prey to the false consensus effect, believing that because your group agreed, everyone must think the same way. Segment 13. The primacy effect. The primacy effect is a cognitive bias that causes you to remember the first piece of information you received more clearly than subsequent information. When meeting someone new, your first impression tends to stick, regardless of their actions later. You meet someone for the first time at a networking event. They give a firm handshake, speak confidently, and seem knowledgeable. Even though their behavior later might not live up to that first impression, you continue to view them positively, as the first impression left a strong mark on your perception. Segment 14. The recency effect. The recency effect is similar to the primacy effect, but it involves the tendency to remember the most recent information better than earlier information. This bias often affects how you perceive events or people based on the last things you heard or saw. You're at a conference where multiple speakers present throughout the day. The final speaker delivers an exceptional, compelling presentation. When you reflect on the event later, you find that you remember the last speaker's talk the most, even though the others had been insightful as well. The recency effect leads you to weigh the last experience more heavily in your memory. Segment 15. The anchoring effect. The anchoring effect occurs when you rely too heavily on the first piece of information you receive when making decisions. It often distorts your judgment, making subsequent information seem more reasonable by comparison. You enter a store and see a suit priced at $1,000. While you hesitate, a salesperson shows you another suit priced at $500, saying it's a great deal. Because of the high initial price of the first suit, you perceive the $500 suit as a bargain. The anchor price of $1,000 has distorted your judgment, making the second suit appear more reasonable, even if it's still expensive for your budget. Segment 16. The Barnum effect. The Barnum effect, or the Forer effect, is the tendency to believe vague or general statements about yourself to be highly accurate, even if they could apply to anyone. This effect is often seen in horoscopes, personality tests, and fortune-telling. You read your horoscope and find that it contains statements like, "You have a great need for others to like and admire you." You feel that it perfectly describes your personality. However, this is a general statement that could apply to almost anyone, and yet you believe it to be specifically true for you due to the Barnum effect. Segment 17. The Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect is the phenomenon where higher expectations lead to an increase in performance. It is a form of self-fulfilling prophecy, where the belief in someone's potential can encourage them to achieve more. Your teacher tells you that they have high expectations for you this semester, believing you have the potential to excel. As a result, you put more effort into your studies, perform better, and eventually live up to their expectations. The belief in your ability led you to perform better, making the Pygmalion effect a powerful force in shaping behavior and outcomes. Segment 18. The self-serving bias. The self-serving bias is the tendency to attribute your successes to your own abilities and efforts, while blaming external factors for your failures. This bias helps to protect your self-esteem and maintain a positive view of yourself. You just finished a major project at work, and it was a huge success. You immediately credit your hard work, dedication, and brilliant strategy for the successful outcome. However, when a similar project fails, you quickly blame it on external factors such as poor team cooperation or lack of resources. You don't recognize that the failure may have also been due to your own mistakes or shortcomings. This is the self-serving bias, where you take credit for successes and externalize failures. Segment 19. The Just World Hypothesis. The just world hypothesis is the belief that the world is fundamentally just, and people get what they deserve. This belief can lead you to justify unfair situations or victim blaming. You hear about someone losing their job due to a sudden cut in company funding. You think to yourself, they must have done something wrong for this to happen. Even though the person was laid off due to no fault of their own, you assume that the world must be fair and that everyone gets what they deserve. This is the just world hypothesis, believing that bad things happen to people because they somehow deserve it, even when it's not the case. Segment 20. The sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy occurs when you continue to invest time, money, or effort into something because you've already invested so much, even though it no longer serves your best interest. You're watching a movie, but it's not enjoyable. The plot is weak, and the acting is subpar. However, because you've already watched 90 minutes of the film, you convince yourself to stick it out and finish it. Even though continuing the movie isn't adding any value to your experience, you feel compelled to finish it because of the time you've already spent on it. This is the sunk cost fallacy, continuing an endeavor simply because of the resources already invested, rather than rationally assessing whether it's worth continuing. Segment 21. The Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where people with limited knowledge or skills in a particular area tend to overestimate their ability. The less competent they are, the more confident they feel in their abilities. You're learning a new language, and after a few lessons, you feel that you've mastered it. When speaking to native speakers, you're overly confident about your fluency, despite making numerous errors. Because your knowledge is still shallow, you don't realize how much more you need to learn. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect, overestimating your competence in an area where you actually lack expertise. Segment 22. The false memory effect. The false memory effect occurs when you vividly recall an event that never actually happened or misremember certain details about an event. Our memories are not as reliable as we think, and they can be influenced by outside sources. You distinctly remember a childhood incident where your parents took you to the zoo and bought you your favorite ice cream. However, as you grow older, you discover that your family never went to the zoo during that time. What's happened is that your mind created a false memory, mixing up events from different times in your life. The false memory effect has led you to believe in an event that never occurred. Segment 23. The illusory superiority effect. The illusory superiority effect is the tendency to believe that you are better than the average person at something, even when that's not true. You consider yourself an excellent driver, far superior to others on the road. You may even feel that you're a safer, more responsible driver than most people. However, when you look at the statistics, it becomes clear that you are, in fact, average, or maybe even below average. The illusory superiority effect has distorted your self-perception, making you believe you're better than others, when, in reality, you are not. Segment 24. The availability heuristic. The availability heuristic is a mental shortcut where you make decisions or judgments based on the information that is most readily available to you, often overestimating the probability of an event. After hearing about a recent plane crash on the news, you start to feel anxious about flying. Even though flying is statistically safer than driving, the dramatic news story about the crash makes you believe that the risk of flying is higher than it actually is. The availability heuristic has led you to base your judgment on vivid, easily accessible information, rather than the actual probabilities. Segment 25. The in-group bias. The in-group bias is the tendency to favor people who belong to the same group as you, whether it's a social group, a team, or even a political affiliation. You're part of a close-knit social group that frequently hangs out together. When discussing a new member who has recently joined the group, you find yourself automatically defending them, even when they've made mistakes, simply because they belong to your group. This is the in-group bias, where you are more likely to overlook faults and favor those within your own group. Segment 26. The outgroup homogeneity bias. The outgroup homogeneity bias is the tendency to perceive members of other groups as being more similar to each other than they actually are. You often attribute negative qualities to people outside your group without considering their individuality. You're part of a sports team, and when you face off against an opposing team, you assume that all players on the other team are aggressive and unskilled. Based on previous experiences, you fail to recognize that the other team members each have their own unique skills and personalities. The outgroup homogeneity bias leads you to generalize and stereotype those who are outside your own group. Segment 27. The bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect is a psychological phenomenon where you adopt a belief or behavior because it's popular, not because you genuinely believe in it. You see a new fashion trend gaining popularity. Everyone in your social circle is wearing it, and even celebrities have embraced it. Despite not initially liking the trend, you decide to buy into it, simply because it's becoming widespread. The bandwagon effect makes you feel like you must follow the trend to fit in, even if it doesn't align with your personal style. Segment 28. The contrast effect. The contrast effect occurs when you compare two things in a way that makes one seem better than the other, even if both are similar in quality. You visit a car dealership and see two cars, one priced at $40,000 and another priced at $25,000. The $40,000 car seems far too expensive, but when you compare it to the $25,000 car, it seems like a much better deal, even though both cars are similar in terms of features and quality. The contrast effect has made you perceive the $25,000 car as a better deal by comparing it to the higher price car. Segment 29. The spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is the tendency to believe that everyone is paying attention to you and noticing your mistakes or embarrassing moments, even when they are not. You trip and fall while walking into a meeting and immediately feel like everyone in the room is staring at you. You think they're all focused on your mistake, but in reality, most people are too busy with their own thoughts and tasks to even notice. The spotlight effect makes you believe that you're the center of attention, when in reality, others are often not as focused on you as you think. Segment 30. The negativity bias. The negativity bias is the tendency to give more weight to negative experiences or feedback than to positive ones. It's a natural survival mechanism, but it can distort your perception of situations. You receive 10 compliments on your presentation at work, but focus on the one piece of critical feedback you received. Despite the overall positive reaction, you find yourself dwelling on the criticism. making it seem far worse than it really was. The negativity bias has led you to give more weight to the negative feedback, even when the positive feedback far outweighs it. Segment 31. The fading affect bias. The fading affect bias is the phenomenon where emotional reactions to negative events diminish over time, making past negative experiences seem less impactful than they once were. You reflect on a past relationship that ended in heartbreak. While you still feel some sadness, the intensity of your emotions has decreased over time. The anger and frustration you felt at the time of the breakup seem less significant now, and you only remember the good moments. This is the fading affect bias, where negative feelings fade with time, making past experiences seem less painful. Segment 32. The misattribution of arousal. The misattribution of arousal occurs when you misinterpret the source of your emotions, often attributing feelings of excitement or anxiety to the wrong cause. You're on a thrilling roller coaster ride, feeling your heart race and adrenaline surge. When the ride ends, you find yourself sitting next to someone you just met, and you feel an unexpected sense of attraction toward them. In reality, the excitement you feel is a result of the thrilling ride, but you mistakenly attribute your emotional response to the person sitting next to you. This is the misattribution of arousal, where your feelings of excitement are misattributed to something else.